The pilot pointed at her seat and said, "Move. This seat is not for you." The cabin froze. No one knew that the quiet black woman he was humiliating wasn't a passenger. She was the owner of the plane. And in the next few minutes, one sentence would destroy his career forever. Before the story continues, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because stories like this reveal truths no one wants to talk about. The private jet hummed softly as passengers settled into their seats, surrounded by polished wood, leather interiors, and the kind of luxury most people only saw in movies. This wasn't a normal flight. Everyone on board was wealthy, powerful, or connected. CEOs, investors, and high-ranking executives spoke quietly, confident they belonged here. That's why the woman sitting calmly in seat 1A stood out. Not because she looked out of place, but because people decided she did. She wore a simple coat, no visible jewelry, no assistant by her side, just a small bag at her feet and a composed expression on her face. Captain Ryan Cole stepped into the cabin for his final inspection. 15 years of flying private jets had trained his eyes to spot anything unusual instantly. And there it was. Someone was sitting in the owner's seat. That seat was sacred, reserved only for the billionaire who owned the aircraft. Ryan's jaw tightened as he walked closer, already assuming a mistake had been made. "Ma'am," he said firmly, his tone sharp but controlled. "You need to move to your assigned seat. This one is reserved." The woman looked up slowly, meeting his eyes without fear or confusion. "I don't believe there's been a mistake," she replied calmly. A few passengers exchanged glances. One man smirked. Another shook his head as if amused. Ryan felt irritation rise in his chest. He had a schedule to keep, and he didn't appreciate being challenged, especially not by someone he assumed didn't belong. "This is a private jet," he said louder now. "The owner will be boarding shortly. I suggest you move before this becomes embarrassing." The woman didn't flinch. She didn't rush. She simply adjusted her posture and folded her hands again. "I'm not moving," she said quietly. The air in the cabin changed. Laughter stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. The confidence in Ryan's voice wavered for the first time. He wasn't used to defiance, especially not delivered so calmly. "Ma'am," he snapped, "if you refuse to cooperate, I'll have security escort you off this aircraft." A flight attendant nearby stiffened. Something about this felt wrong. Very wrong. She studied the woman's face more closely, searching her memory. But before she could speak, the woman reached into her coat pocket. Ryan's heart jumped. "What are you doing?" he demanded. She pulled out her phone, glanced at the screen, and said softly, "They're here." "Who's here?" Ryan asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked out the window. Outside on the runway, several black SUVs rolled to a stop beside the jet. Men in tailored suits stepped out, scanning the area with sharp, professional eyes. These weren't airport staff. These were private security, high-level, expensive, and powerful. A murmur spread through the cabin. The lead flight attendant rushed to Ryan's side, whispering urgently, "Captain, ground control says the owner has arrived." Relief washed over him. Finally, he turned back toward the woman, ready to order her out of the seat before the real owner came aboard. But she didn't stand. She remained seated. The cabin door opened. Heavy footsteps climbed the stairs. One man entered, then another, then another. All of them stopped the moment they saw seat 1A. Without hesitation, they turned toward the woman and nodded respectfully. "Good afternoon, Miss Carter," the lead man said. "Everything is ready." The color drained from Ryan's face. Slowly, the woman stood. She faced the pilot, her voice calm, steady, and unmistakably powerful. "Captain," she said, "this aircraft belongs to me." No one breathed. Ryan's world collapsed in silence as the truth hit him harder than any turbulence ever could. And this was only the beginning. Ryan felt his throat go dry as the meaning of her words settled in. The cabin, once filled with quiet confidence and casual chatter, had turned into a room of frozen statues. Every passenger stared at the woman who had just claimed ownership of the aircraft, their expressions shifting from disbelief to shock. Ryan forced a nervous laugh, hoping, praying, this was some kind of misunderstanding. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "There must be some confusion." The owner's name wasn't disclosed to the crew. Ms. Carter studied him for a long moment. Not with anger, not with pride, just with a calm that made his discomfort worse. "That's correct," she replied. It was intentional. The men who had boarded the jet positioned themselves quietly near the entrance, their presence heavy and unmistakable. One of them handed her a tablet. She glanced at it briefly, then nodded. Captain Cole, she said, reading his name again. You've been flying this aircraft for 3 years. Excellent safety record. Very punctual. But today, you made a dangerous mistake. Ryan swallowed hard. Ma'am, if I offended you in any way, you didn't offend me, she interrupted gently. You revealed something. A low murmur rippled through the cabin. Passengers leaned forward, hanging on to every word. Miss Carter took her seat again, not as a passenger now, but as the undeniable authority in the room. I invest in technology, she continued, her voice steady. But I also invest in people. That's why I sometimes travel without announcements, without entourages, without titles. I like to observe. Ryan felt his legs weaken. He realized, with a sickening clarity, that this entire moment had been a test, and he had failed it publicly. One of the executives in the second row cleared his throat. Ms. Carter, he said carefully, we had no idea. She nodded politely. That's the point. Ryan stepped back, his confidence completely gone. I made an assumption, he admitted quietly. Yes, she said. You assumed I didn't belong. The words hit harder than a reprimand. They echoed in the silence, forcing everyone to confront the uncomfortable truth hanging in the air. Miss Carter turned slightly, addressing the cabin now. How many of you assumed the same thing? She asked. No one answered. She smiled faintly. Exactly. Ryan felt every eye drift back to him. He wanted to disappear. Miss Carter, he said, his voice barely steady. I take full responsibility. Please allow me to apologize. She studied him again, then nodded. Apologies matter, she said. But accountability matters more. She signaled to one of her security advisors, who leaned in and whispered something in her ear. She listened carefully, then looked back at Ryan. Captain Cole, you will complete this flight, she said. His heart leapt for a split second, until she continued. But after we land, there will be a formal review of your conduct. Not just today. All of it. Ryan nodded, unable to speak. The jet doors closed. Engines powered up. As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, the atmosphere remained heavy. No one spoke. The usual confidence of wealth and status had been replaced by discomfort and self-reflection. Miss Carter gazed out the window, her expression thoughtful rather than triumphant. As they climbed into the sky, the lead flight attendant approached Miss Carter carefully. Miss Carter, she said softly, I just wanted to say thank you. For what? Miss Carter asked. For reminding us that appearances lie, the attendant replied. Miss Carter smiled warmly for the first time. You noticed before anyone else, she said. That matters. From the cockpit, Ryan focused on the instruments, but his mind replayed every second of the encounter. He thought about how quickly he had judged her, how easily authority had turned into arrogance. He had always believed himself fair, professional, above prejudice, but the truth was now undeniable. Midway through the flight, turbulence shook the cabin. A few passengers gasped. Ryan adjusted the controls smoothly, his training taking over. Over the intercom, he announced calmly, Ladies and gentlemen, just a bit of rough air. We'll be through it shortly. Miss Carter listened, her expression unreadable. When the turbulence passed, she stood and walked toward the cockpit. The cabin went silent again as she knocked gently on the door. Ryan's co-pilot opened it, startled. May I? Miss Carter asked. Ryan turned, surprised. Of course, he said quickly. She stepped inside, looking around the cockpit with interest. You fly well, she said. Skill was never the issue. Ryan nodded slowly. I understand that now. She met his eyes. Do you? He hesitated, then spoke honestly. I thought I did. But today showed me I still have a lot to learn. She considered his words. That answer, she said, is why you're still flying this plane today. Relief washed over him, but it was mixed with humility. Thank you, he said. She shook her head slightly. Don't thank me, she replied. Do better. With that, she turned and left the cockpit. Ryan watched her go, knowing this flight would follow him for the rest of his career, not as a scandal, but as a lesson he could never unlearn. And when the plane finally began its descent, everyone on board understood one thing clearly. Power didn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it sat quietly in the front row, waiting to see who would recognize it. The plane descended smoothly through the clouds, but inside the cabin, Tension still lingered like static in the air. No one spoke much. The earlier confidence of the passengers had faded, replaced by quiet reflection. Miss Carter returned to her seat in 1A, opening a slim folder on her lap, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But everyone knew something had changed. Not just for the pilot, for all of them. As the jet touched down and rolled toward the private terminal, Ryan felt a weight settle in his chest. He had flown into storms before, handled emergencies at 30,000 feet, but nothing compared to the fear of facing the consequences waiting on the ground. When the engines powered down and the seatbelt sign turned off, he took a deep breath and prepared himself. The cabin door opened. Outside, more security and several executives from the aviation management company waited. Their posture was formal, serious. Ms. Carter stood first, adjusting her coat. Before stepping off, she turned back to the cabin. "I appreciate everyone's patience today," she said evenly. "This flight will be remembered, not because of where we went, but because of what we learned." No one responded. They simply watched as she exited the plane. Ryan followed moments later. The lead operations manager approached immediately. "Captain Cole," he said quietly, "Miss Carter would like a word with you." "Now." Ryan nodded and followed, his heart pounding. They entered a private lounge where Ms. Carter stood by the window, looking out at the runway. She didn't turn when he entered. "Sit," she said calmly. Ryan obeyed. She finally faced him. "I want to be clear," she said. "This is not about punishing you." He looked up, confused. "Then what is it about?" "Understanding," she replied. "And responsibility." She explained that she had purchased the aircraft through a holding company years earlier. Not to hide, but to observe. She funded programs, hired crews, invested in aviation companies. And occasionally, she traveled anonymously to see how people behaved when they thought power wasn't watching. "Today," she said, "you saw a woman who didn't fit your idea of ownership." Ryan lowered his eyes. "Yes. You didn't ask who I was," she continued. "You told me who I wasn't." The words cut deep. "I've worked my entire life to build what I own," she said. "Not just wealth, credibility, respect. And yet, in one moment, all of that disappeared because of how I looked." Ryan felt shame burn in his chest. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "There's no excuse." Ms. Carter studied him carefully. "Do you know how many times this happens every day?" she asked. "In offices, in airports, in hospitals, in schools." He shook his head slowly. "Too many," she said. "And most people never get the chance to correct it." She paused, then said something Ryan didn't expect. "I'm not firing you." His head snapped up. "You're not." "No," she said. "But you will attend a leadership and bias accountability program. And you will speak, publicly, about what happened today." Ryan swallowed. "Publicly? Yes," she said. "Not to shame you. To educate others. If you truly learn something, then use your voice." He nodded slowly. "I will." Ms. Carter extended her hand. Ryan hesitated for half a second, then shook it firmly. "Thank you," he said. She smiled faintly. "This wasn't kindness," she replied. "It was investment." News of the incident spread quickly, though not in the way people expected. Ms. Carter didn't allow tabloids or gossip. Instead, a carefully written statement was released. It spoke about assumptions, leadership, and accountability, without naming anyone. But people recognized the story immediately. Within days, Ryan stood in front of a room filled with pilots, crew members, and executives. Cameras recorded every word as he told the truth, without excuses. He spoke about authority, about arrogance, and about how easily professionalism could hide prejudice. "I thought I was fair," he said. "I was wrong." The video went viral. Comments flooded in. Some were harsh, some were supportive, but most were grateful. Grateful someone in power had admitted a mistake instead of denying it. Meanwhile, Ms. Carter continued her work quietly. She funded training programs, mentorship initiatives, and diversity reforms across multiple industries. She never spoke angrily about what happened. She didn't need to. Her actions spoke louder than outrage ever could. Months later, Ryan received a letter. No return address. Inside was a simple note. "Growth begins where comfort ends. Keep flying higher." He smiled for the first time in weeks. On another flight, in another city, a young black woman boarded a private jet as an executive guest. This time, no one questioned her seat. No one asked her to move. And though she never knew it, That small moment of respect existed because of one uncomfortable truth revealed at 30,000 feet. And somewhere in the sky, lessons learned were still changing lives, one flight at a time. Time passed, but the impact of that flight refused to fade. Ryan returned to the cockpit with a different mindset, one shaped not by authority, but by awareness. Every announcement he made, every interaction with crew and passengers, carried a new weight. He listened more. He questioned his instincts. And most importantly, he paused before judging. The sky was the same, but he wasn't. The accountability program Ms. Carter required him to attend was not easy. It forced him to confront uncomfortable truths, not just about race, but about power and how easily it could blind even well-trained professionals. He sat in rooms with people from all walks of life, listening to stories that echoed his own mistake in different forms. Each story chipped away at the version of himself he once believed in, replacing it with someone more grounded, more human. Meanwhile, Miss Carter's influence continued to spread quietly but powerfully. She didn't give fiery speeches or post emotional videos. Instead, she made strategic moves. She partnered with aviation schools to fund scholarships for underrepresented students. She introduced anonymous evaluation systems so crew members could report bias without fear. She even redesigned training manuals to include real-life scenarios, one of them eerily similar to what had happened on her plane. People began to talk, not about the incident, but about her leadership. She could have destroyed him, one executive said in a meeting, but she chose to build something instead. That choice changed everything. One afternoon, months later, Ryan was assigned a new co-pilot, a young woman named Jasmine. She was confident, sharp, and exceptionally skilled. Early in the flight, turbulence hit unexpectedly. Jasmine handled the controls with calm precision, guiding the aircraft smoothly through the rough air. When it passed, Ryan glanced at her and nodded in respect. "Nice work," he said. She smiled. "Thanks, Captain." In that simple exchange, Ryan felt the difference. No assumptions, no hierarchy beyond skill, just trust. After landing, Jasmine hesitated before leaving the cockpit. "Captain," she said carefully, "I watched your talk. The one that went viral." Ryan braced himself. "And?" She smiled. "It mattered. More than you know." Those words stayed with him. Across the country, Ms. Carter attended a private board meeting. The room was filled with powerful figures, CEOs, investors, policymakers. As she spoke about innovation and leadership, no one questioned her presence. No one underestimated her. But she remembered a time when they might have. At the end of the meeting, a young assistant approached her nervously. "Miss Carter," she said, "I just wanted to say, seeing you where you are, it makes me believe I can get there too." Miss Carter placed a hand on the woman's shoulder. "You already belong," she said. "Never let anyone convince you otherwise." That night, Miss Carter boarded another flight. This time, she wore the same simple coat, the same quiet confidence. As she stepped into the cabin, the crew greeted her respectfully, not because they knew her net worth, but because they had been trained to treat every passenger with dignity. She took her seat, not in 1A this time, but near the window halfway back. And for the first time, she felt something rare. Peace. The world hadn't changed overnight. Bias hadn't disappeared, but a crack had formed in an old system. And through that crack, light was pouring in. Ryan, cruising at 35,000 feet on another flight, looked out at the endless sky. He thought about how close he had come to losing everything, and how, instead, he had gained something far more valuable than pride: perspective. And as the plane cut through the clouds, one truth became clear to everyone touched by that moment. Real power doesn't demand respect, it inspires it. The story of that flight slowly faded from headlines, but it lived on in quieter, more meaningful ways. It lived in changed behavior, in paused judgments, in moments where people chose curiosity over assumption. Ms. Carter never sought credit for any of it. She continued to move through the world the same way she always had: observing, listening, and building. Months later, Ryan received an unexpected invitation. It was a private aviation leadership summit, hosted by a foundation he immediately recognized: Ms. Carter's Foundation. His hands trembled slightly as he read the final line: "We would like you to speak." Standing on that stage felt different from every cockpit he had ever commanded. The audience wasn't looking to him for authority. They were listening for honesty. Ryan took a breath and told the story again, not as a warning, but as a reflection. I thought respect came with position, he said. I learned it comes with humility. The room was silent. Then applause, slow at first, then rising. Not for perfection, but for growth. After the event, Ryan spotted Ms. Carter across the room. She was speaking with a group of students, laughing softly. When she noticed him, she nodded once. Acknowledgement, not approval. That was enough. Outside, a young boy tugged at his mother's hand as a sleek jet roared overhead. "Mom," he asked, "who owns planes like that?" She smiled. "People who dream big and work hard." The boy looked up at the sky, eyes wide. On another flight weeks later, a passenger hesitated before questioning a woman seated in first class. He stopped himself, thought better of it, and said nothing. That moment passed quietly, but it mattered. Miss Carter sat alone in her office one evening, reviewing reports from the programs she had funded. Numbers, charts, progress. But her eyes lingered on a handwritten note pinned to her board. It read simply, "Change doesn't need permission." She smiled. The plane she owned continued to fly across continents, carrying powerful people, important deals, and everyday moments. But its most valuable cargo was invisible. The lesson that dignity should never be conditional. And somewhere between takeoff and landing, between assumption and truth, the world shifted just enough to make room for something better. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a billionaire can own isn't a plane. It's perspective.